The X Factor, released back in 1995 by Iron Maiden, the first studio album to feature Blaze Bayley on vocals. What do I think about this controversial record? Well, let's jump into it right now. I'm Chainsaw. This is my review of the 10th studio album from Iron Maiden entitled The X Factor. So, the big thing is, right off the bat, Bruce Dickinson is out of the band, and now we have Blaze Bayley, the new vocalist. So right there, the controversy starts with the new vocalist, because we've gotten used to Bruce Dickinson for so long. He's been with the band for so many albums at this point, and now we have a new vocalist. Okay, well, let's, for me at least, okay, I'm going to give him a chance. I've heard a lot of negativity about him and about the X Factor from people throughout the years about this particular album and the album after this one. But I went into this album with an open mind, because most of the times people are not right, or at least it's their opinions, so I will take it as it is, as their opinion and their interpretation of the album. But I'm going to go into the X Factor with an open mind, because maybe this album will surprise me and be like, holy crap, this is amazing! Who knows? So, went to the X Factor with an open mind. I will have to admit, right off the bat, the first listen through, my first thought was, there is a lot of songs, and this album is long. Man, over an hour in length. I'm used to that, but there's a lot of material on here. And number two, Blaze Bayley's vocals, it's okay. The first listen through, right? So I went through it again a couple more times, and then took a day or so off, and then came back to it and listened to it some more. And my final conclusion is this: The X Factor is not a terrible record, but it's also not a fantastic record. It's an album that has its strong moments and its weak moments. It has these moments that make you go, wow, that was a great section. And also has these other moments where you go, they could have did more with that. They could have did more there. And it really bothers me, because I've heard a couple of these albums before from Iron Maiden. I've had mixed, thoughts about albums in the past, to where it has strong moments and weak moments. And I'm hoping that I'll come across that album that will go, damn, this is a great record. I'm waiting for that moment again. However, the X Factor, to me, surprised me in some areas, because when I was hearing all these moments on this album, as we got through the first two tracks, which are great, there was a lot of these moments in some songs entirely that I wasn't really impressed. I wasn't really going, I want to hear this again, I want to hear this song again. It's got some great, things going for it. No, it was more of me just going, okay, let's go to the next song and see what happens. Because this album just feels like that they took some songs and just didn't do a lot with them, and kind of just threw them in and went, that's going to work there. And it really doesn't. And there's other songs that maybe they didn't do a lot of work, and it actually did work out for the best, because it actually was a catchy song. It was maybe simple in a sense, but it worked for where it was on the album. Then there you go. But not all the times is it to where you're going to write a simple song, or a song that has a lot of simple ideas going into it, where nothing is really going on except that central idea, that it's going to be hit or miss with a lot of people. For me, this album is right down the middle. There are some moments where it hits, some moments where it misses. And I think the biggest thing that really bothered me, as I said earlier in this review, is that there's a lot of songs on here. Now, 11 tracks is not a lot, but the length of the songs is insane. I personally believe, after listening to this album and getting my whole thing about my opinion about this album, is if Iron Maiden, before this album was finished up, went back into the studio before they finished it and did these two things, I think this album, for me personally, would be received better by fans, and I think would be appreciated by fans, maybe liked by fans, maybe even loved by fans. Number one, there are 11 tracks on this album, over an hour in music. I personally believe cut down 11 tracks to about 8 or 9, and then the 8 or 9 tracks that you are down to now for this album, focus a lot more time on those individual tracks. Even if you think they're great and they're perfect, nothing needs to be changed, go back and look at them again and see if there's more you can add, because there definitely is more you can add to some of these songs. So cut that down. It's right there. Number two, Blaze Bayley. As you guys are wondering, my thoughts on him, because that's a big thing through the Iron Maiden fans, is what people think about him. Two, Blaze Bayley. In some areas, his vocal style and what he's doing on some choruses and some verses and just some sections in general, I feel like that he's not really pushing himself. I feel like that he sometimes is afraid to kind of, burst out and really do something. Now, for the most part, I think for what is musically on this album, as this album is not a, throwback to the 80s. This is a more modernized sound with some 80s style of writing, but a lot more modernized and simpler things going on throughout here, and a lot of really slow moments. But I feel like that for the most part, he's doing a good job. But the second thing that should have happened for me personally is that he should go back and re-record some of these sections. And really, when the song is needing that high moment, that moment to where you're supposed to let it out and let it go and just scream and all these things, that moment, where Bruce Dickinson, as he was a vocalist, he would, scream and, sing to the heavens. With Blaze Bayley, he's not doing that when the music needs it. Maybe sometimes he is, but a lot of the times he's not. He's just there, and he's not really pushing it. But when he does push it, you're like, yeah, go, do it, yes. But on these other parts where he's not, that's where it bothers me, because he's not really pushing himself to the full potential, because he has to replace Bruce Dickinson, the legend. And he's coming onto this album, and he knows what people are expecting. He knows that he knows a lot of people are going to be prejudging him, and he knows that he has to prove himself for fans to accept him. Because at this time, they didn't know how long he was going to be in the band, but he didn't really push himself to the full potential that he should have for this record to really grab more fans to enjoy him. That's why I think this album is a huge controversy, because he didn't really push himself, and people automatically out the gate just didn't want him. But the thing is, though, for the most part, his vocal style does work for this music. But if he pushed himself a little bit more, I think this album, I think people would at least appreciate him more, at least. And maybe people would like him more if he really pushed himself to that full potential, because I personally believe he didn't. Now, musically, like I said a little bit earlier, this sounds like a more modernized Iron Maiden, to where they weren't really trying to go too hectic and crazy, because I personally believe Blaze Bayley's vocal style does not fit that throwback 80s Iron Maiden. If the X Factor was a throwback to the 80s, like hypothetically, X Factor, we're going back to the 80s. We're going to do a throwback to Power Slave, Peace of Mind, Number of the Beast. Man, this album would be a disaster, because Blaze Bayley, his vocal style does not fit that at all. But the fact that the X Factor goes in the direction as it does, for the most part, his vocals do fit. And the music and him do blend together very well for the most part. My favorite songs in this album, as some songs, it's the entire song. Other songs, it's part of the song that I really enjoy. But my favorite tracks out of the 11 are Sign of the Cross, the opening track. 11 minutes and 17 seconds. Jeez. It's a long song, but it has a lot of good things going for it. And it keeps your attention. And the fact that this song is so long and it keeps your attention all the way through, all 11 minutes in length. And then when you hear the other songs later on this album that have huge lengths, not as huge as 11 minutes, but they're not keeping your attention half the time, that's a bad sign. They should have learned a lesson from Sign of the Cross, because that's a great opening track. And for me personally, yes, it is my favorite song on the album. Lord of the Flies, track number 2, a great track to follow Sign of the Cross. I like that song a lot. Man on the Edge is a pretty interesting track. Fortunes of War, I like it a little bit. I do not like Blaze Bayley's chorus he decided to do on Fortunes of War. It's kind of annoying in a sense. The Aftermath, track number 6, another fantastic track. I really recommend that one. Judgment of Heaven, another good one to really listen to. The Edge of Darkness, once again. And The Unbeliever, the final track, I do enjoy it in some sections. In other sections, I don't really enjoy it that much. But it is a good track to kind of close the album. I really wish that maybe they would have picked Sign of the Cross. Probably would have been a really cool song to end the album. Maybe it wouldn't fit and work, but maybe that would have been a really cool way to end the album with an 11-minute closer. So, but yeah, those are my favorite tracks out of the 11. So let's go to the actual personnel itself. Like I've said before about Blaze Bayley, for the most part, his vocal style, it does work in a lot of sections, but it's the moments where he's not really pushing himself to that full potential. That's where I have an issue with him. Because at first I didn't like his vocal style. I didn't like his vocals. But I got used to it, and it started to really fit the music very well in most cases. So I can't really bash him. But what I do want to bash him on is that he should have pushed himself more. I personally believe he did not. So let's go with that. Steve Harris on bass, as I usually do guitars next, but Steve Harris on bass. You know, the reason why this album is considered the darkest album is because he was going through a divorce, as I was reading, and the lyrics really do reflect that. I still feel like that Steve Harris does a great job on bass. There's a lot of great moments to where his bass is really standing out, and he has a fantastic bass sound for this record. The sound of this album is great, in my personal opinion. So his bass guitar definitely sounds great. So, but yeah, he was definitely going through a rough time. But I think that, you know, when you're going through a rough time, at least when I do, I really, you know, sit down and play my guitar and, you know, all that stuff to kind of, you know, forget about the issues I'm having. So I feel like that Steve Harris probably did the same thing here. He wrote out his thoughts and his feelings on the lyrics and actually, you know, try to forget about the issues that are going on in his personal life and just play the bass. And I feel like that really transpired very well. Dave Murray and Janick Gers on guitar. Now, like I've been saying, that the music does go a more simpler route. The guitars, they sound a little bit like Iron Maiden-ish, but they're kind of, you know, not as hectic and heavy in a sense. The riffing on this album, it varies a lot in between the very simple riffs, some a little bit modernized, fast-paced riffs, and we get to the actual little bit faster riffs. And the melodies, there's not a lot of guitar melodies and harmonies, but when they do pop up, they're a nice surprise, and they're really cool and really catchy to listen to. So I really don't have a lot of issues with the guitar parts. I feel like that, I do feel like personally, there are some riffs that are too simple for my taste in a sense of where they could have come up with a more creative riff there instead of just having this particular chord being played and then switch to this particular chord and play it, you know, in a very simple way. So they could have probably come up with a little bit more interesting riffs there. But overall, the guitars, I feel like for the most part, are good on this record for what they are. Nicko McBrain, you know, he's doing his best here. The fact that the music really does a lot of switches and changes. But I feel like the drumming on this album, for the most part, Nicko McBrain is doing a great job, you know, for what it is. I feel like the whole entire band is doing good. But I feel like that they really could have pushed themselves a little bit more to really push themselves to that extra step on some of these songs to really make them stand out more. And the fact that, you know, I don't have an issue with a lot of the music. It's just that they could have did more. That's my main thing that I want to get across on top of Blaze Bayley and all that. The X Factor, I'll repeat again, is not a bad record, but it's also not a fantastic record. It's a good record in some sections. It's an okay record in some sections. And in some moments, you're just going to say to yourself, man, they could have did more with this song. They really could have. And so if some of these songs could have been worked on a little bit more, maybe this album would be a little bit appreciated more. Maybe if Blaze Bayley did a little bit more with his vocals, it'd be appreciated more. But for what it is, the X Factor for me personally is a 6.5 out of 10. A 7 on a good day. On some days it's a 7, but a 6.5 is what I'm going to give it because they could have did more with this album. But for what it is, I recommend it to check it out. It might be a good album for you. It may not. Just depends on what you like and what you don't like from Iron Maiden. So the X Factor, there you go, guys. Let me know in the comment section below what you think of the X Factor. Let me know. And yeah, so that's the end of the review. If you liked the video, like the video. If you want to see me or more of my stuff, click my name or subscribe to see more. Thank you guys for watching. See ya.